All right, in this video, we are going to complete the BigQuery Basics lab. Let's start the lab. I'm logged in with my Google account, which is associated with my GCP Study Hub account. And now the lab is being provisioned. Our lab is active. We see the GCP project ID that we're going to be using, the lab name, and my email address. And we have 30 minutes to complete the lab. Now we're in our GCP project that we're going to use for the lab. And for this, we're going to go down to and we need to start by creating a dataset. Dataset ID is lab dataset. And the region that we're going to be using is US Central 1, again, just for compliance and security purposes. Let's create that dataset. And we're going to be going back over to the lab instructions, seeing that our data set has been created, and we're going to download the sample CSV that we're going to be using for this lab. So going back to BigQuery, we can now create a table within this data set. And we can call it sales data, but first we're going to configure this to be created from an upload. That's going to be the source, and the file that we're going to use is the data set that we just downloaded, and the destination is lab project BFE FJB. That's the project that we were provisioned for this lab. The data set is the data set that we just created. And the table, as I said, we're going to call sales data because that's just the example file that we're using. But really, this doesn't have to be sales data. It could be any data that you want to upload to BigQuery. For schema, we're going to auto-detect the schema. Usually this works, but occasionally you may need to configure it manually. And you'll see an error in the import job if you need to do that. For partitioning, we're not going to worry about that right now. And we are going to configure it to skip one header row. So down here we see header rows to skip. We're going to configure it to skip one header row. And that's because in our table, we have a header with the column names, and then the actual data starts. And if you open it up yourself, you'll see that. Okay, now we're going to create the table. And it's going to take a second to create the table. And if we click on the table that's been created, we can see the schema. We can see some details about the table, the table ID, when it was created and modified, which are the same right now because all we've done is create it. We can see the location of the data. We can see the number of rows, which is 2,000. Which isn't really that much. And the number of bytes is very small as well. That's just because we're doing this for demonstration purposes. And so now we can actually run a query on this data. So I'm going to open up a new SQL query, and I'm going to go back to the lab instructions. And here we've got step 7, run your first query. So I've already opened up a new query, and I'm going to enter this SQL query. Now I'm just going to copy this in for simplicity's sake, but really, especially if you want to learn SQL, it'd be good to familiarize yourself with what this is actually doing. But we're going to run this query and see the results here. And essentially, we've grouped the data by region, and then we've aggregated for each region, the number of orders, the total revenue, and the average revenue. So this might be an example of a calculation we would actually want to do on a sales data set if we wanted to see it broken out by region in this way. So you could see how quickly the query ran, right? And obviously this was on a very small data set, but BigQuery is known for just how fast it can run even on big data sets. Hence BigQuery. So we're going to go back to the instructions, and we've got a different query that we're going to save query results for. That's how we're going to practice this in BigQuery. So we're going to select the, instead of the region, we're going to select the product category and run some aggregations on the product category. And before we run this, there are actually kind of multiple ways you can save the results of a query. But before we run this is the way that we're going to do it now. We are going to click on this More button here, and we're going to open Query Settings. And we're going to save the query results in a destination table. And we're just going to call it Query Results. So the data set is going to be the data set that we created, which if we start to type lab data set, you'll see it pop up. And the table ID is going to be query results. Really you would probably want something more descriptive than this, but again, we're just practicing the basics here. Query results could apply to any query that you run, right? But we might want to call this instead, in the real world, we might want to call this, product category, orders, units sold, and revenue, or something like that, or product category stats, right? And let's see, we want this to be right if empty, which is what we have here already. And really that's it. The location type here, we can't even edit because it's just automatically going to make it the same as the parent data set. And we're going to save this configuration, run the query, and you'll see that it'll just take a second. And this time we've got it broken out by product category with some statistics about each of the product categories. And we can already see that the table has been saved underneath the lab data set. And we've called it query results. And so again, you can see the information about the table. You can see a preview of the data, only a few rows because there were only 5 product categories, but really this could be a huge table aggregating the results of many rows in a source table, from a source table. Okay, so now I believe we have done everything in the lab. And so we can validate our work by going over to the lab checker. I'm going to click this to just sign in with my Google account. And then I'm going to check completion. And because I completed the lab correctly, I get this lab completion token, which I'm going to copy. And I'm going to put in here just to verify the token. And if I was completing this in a GCP Study Hub course, I would click Mark Lesson Complete in order to actually mark the lesson complete. But because I'm doing this as a standalone exercise, this will actually do nothing. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.